The Veteran's Voice, stories that deserve to be heard.
My name is Jim Johnson. I was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, and this is my story. You know, I would love to say that I had this grand story of wanting to serve my country, of wanting to do something brave. The truth of the matter is that a Marine Corps recruiter came to me, and when I went and told my father, and I told some of my friends, they were like, "Oh, you can't do that. That's too hard. You wouldn't last." And in life, one of the surefire way to get me to do something is to tell me that I can't do it. And that is really the gospel truth as to why I joined the Marine Corps. Of course, I understood the Marine Corps. My grandfather was a Marine Raider during World War II. And although he didn't talk about the things that he did, he was always very proud of his time in the Marine Corps. I was 17 years old when I went into the Marine Corps. Spent my 18th birthday in boot camp. In fact, I could probably tell you that the 2nd of October in 1980 was the darkest day emotionally for me, because it was the day that I had to fly to San Diego, get picked up, hauled off to MCRD in San Diego, and told to stand on the yellow footprints. I had no idea what I got myself into. And it was tough, very tough. They say that Marine Corps makes Marines. You don't go in as a Marine, and that's quite true. When I arrived at boot camp, I couldn't run a mile. I couldn't do any pull-ups. And I was terrified of my own shadow. And at the time, you're supposed to spend 12 weeks in Marine Corps boot camp. I got to spend 13 weeks in Marine Corps boot camp because I was not a model citizen at one point. Mouthed off a little too much, so I got sent to the disciplinary platoon, which any Marine who went through boot camp can tell you is the guys that wear the silver helmets and are constantly running and jumping and getting the snot beat out of them. It only took me a week to figure it out, that I needed to keep my mouth shut and do what I was told. Some guys, I think, were probably in there for much longer than that. But when you go in to Marine boot camp, you're not a Marine. You're a recruit. And during the time that you're there, they instill in you that you're not a Marine. Unlike the Army, when you go in and you're a private, or the Air Force, when you go in, you're an airman. In the Marine Corps, you're called every name under the sun in boot camp except Marine. So at the end of those 3 cycles of training, when a drill instructor steps forward and calls you a Marine, there's a label that sticks to you, and you feel like you've earned it. I remember our senior drill instructor was saying that you're going to go through life, and there's going to be people who challenge you, whether it's in a bar, whether it's in a car accident, whatever. Some dude's going to step forward and challenge you to prove yourself. And he said, just remember that after your time here in San Diego, you don't have anything to prove. Because by earning the title of a Marine, you have proved yourself to the world. And it was something that you could be proud of. Now, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was supposed to be a combat photographer. That's what I went in for. That's what they signed me up on all the paper for. But what they didn't explain to you is that what you signed up for had to have a need. And it turns out when I was finished with boot camp, the Marine Corps didn't have a need for any combat photographers. What they had a need for was recon photographers. I had no idea what that was. They sent me off to Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, and I learned everything there was to know about 35 millimeter photography, about infrared photography, about using different types of film used in spy planes or whatever the case may be, and learned to read maps. And then I went out. They sent me into infantry training, and when I was done with that, they sent me to recon training. And now all the time, here I am, this kid who's not even 20. I don't really understand what's going on, but I don't like it. I always think of myself as probably the world's worst Marine during that time. Whether that's true or not, I'll let my buddies who served with me figure that part out. Now, I didn't spend a long time in the Marine Corps. I only spent 6 years in the Marine Corps. My time in the Marine Corps was during the early 1980s, of course. And it was a time when America was recovering from Vietnam. But Iraq, the Middle East, all that war on terror, of course, wasn't a part of our lives. And you kind of felt that when you were in the Corps. You know, the fatigues, the camis that we were wearing, a lot of them were from Vietnam. Of course, all the weaponry we were using was all Vietnam weaponry. There wasn't anything new. I carried a 1911 Colt 45 that was made in 1919. Of course, when they handed me the 1911, I thought it was made in 1911, and that's why it was called that. That tells you how great of a Marine I was right there. Little did I know that's just the model number. When I was in the Marine Corps, there were certain aspects of that Marines that we had to do. We had to do Beirut. We had to do Grenada. We had to do Haiti. There was a few things down in South America that we had to do. But it wasn't Vietnam. Thank goodness it wasn't Vietnam. But it was something that America wanted us to do, and we did it. And we did it with some degree of success. Was I in Beirut when 227 Marines were killed when they blew up the barracks? I wasn't. I had just left. I did go back afterwards. But I knew some people that were there, and some people that were amongst those who were blown up while they were sleeping. Not the way you want to go, I guess, if you're a Marine. There's no Valhalla in dying when you're sleeping. So I went through all of this with the Marine Corps. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, it was one of the happiest times of my life. I was so relieved to not be in the Marine Corps anymore. I didn't tell people that I was in the Marine that I was a Marine for a long time. I didn't put it on resumes when I was looking for jobs. And it just seemed like no one cared that that's what you were. And I think maybe that was probably something, looking back now, that was left over from the Vietnam era. But it wasn't something that you talked about. And like I said, I was so relieved to be out of the Marine Corps. I never thought of myself as a great Marine. That probably added to the fact that I didn't talk to people about it. It wasn't until many, many years later that I started to really understand what being in the Marine Corps had done in my life. Undoubtedly, serving your country in that capacity leaves you with some scars, something that you take with you the rest of your life. And, a lot of veterans, I wasn't one of them, but a lot of them know those scars right up front. I didn't understand mine until about 20 years later. But I'm 55 years old now. And probably it's just within the last few years of my life that I've begun to understand the gifts, the lessons that I learned during those 6 years that have carried over into my life. And they're what has helped shape me as a man, as a father, as an employee, as a boss at sometimes. And those are some of the silent things that I wish more of my brothers and sisters who have served in the military would understand about themselves. You know, I always talk to veterans, and they'll talk about, well, I was a helmsman in the Navy. Unless I'm going into the Merchant Marines or something, that doesn't really transfer. Or, you know, my oldest son served in the Army in the infantry. And when he got out of the Army, I was like, well, there's really no jobs for an infantry person. But it's the little things that the military does for you. For me personally, every challenge that I've come through in my life, whether it's been a personal challenge, whether it's been, you know, a family challenge, a business challenge, I realized that I've always looked for solutions to those things. And that's part of what a Marine is. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. That was one of the mottos that was just drowned into us. You don't worry about what you don't have. You worry about how you're going to overcome the obstacles. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. And I realized that I put that forth in my life. And it was an advantage that the Marine Corps gave me. That's a pretty awesome thing. And it's probably what has kept me going through some of the darker times of my life. Is that fact that no matter what happens, no matter what I run into, I'm going to be able to overcome it. I get frustrated with people that point fingers because that's not overcoming anything. That's not solving anything. That's not a solution. The solution is to take care of what's right there in front of you. And the Marine Corps taught me that stubborn nature of looking for that. And I wish some of my brothers and sisters would remember that about themselves. I do carry my own forms of PTSD. I'm claustrophobic. I can't get into any building or situation where I can't get out of it. It's an adventure to fly on an airplane for me. and many stewardesses across this country have learned that it's an adventure for me to try to get on an airplane and fly. I can't take sudden loud noises. Sudden loud noises send me into anger. But even with these things that I've had to face, and I've learned that most likely they came from my time in the Marine Corps, that ability to push forward with them is always there. I feel bad for brothers and sisters who feel that emptiness. I've talked to men and women who served in Afghanistan and Iraq and Vietnam and other places around the world. And they saw things much worse than I ever did. And there's an emptiness in them. But if they think back to what got them through those moments, that's their value. Their value is what made them survive. Their value is what made them push through. The skills that you take into civilian life from a combat situation, sure, they don't exist. But your ability to push through any obstacle that's there, your ability to focus on that solution, your ability to survive is uncommon. It's uncommon in the civilian world. And people will naturally look to you to show them how to do those things. That's the value. And I wish all the employers out there would see that as well. is when these veterans show up, they may have physical handicaps, they may have mental handicaps, they may have emotional handicaps. I don't know. But I tell you what, they know how to get through anything. You have a receptionist throwing a fit over a paper jam. If she's a veteran, she'll fix it. She'll get through it. Because that's what we do as veterans. We survive. We get through. We accomplish what our goal is. It may take us a while to understand it, but it's what we can accomplish. Now, at the age of 55, after all these years, I've raised a family. My 2 boys are amazing. They're grown. They live away from the house. They have lives and dreams of their own. At 55, I'm an actor. That's what I do. That's how I pay my bills, and I'm very proud of the fact that I can say that. It's something that I probably have always wanted to do all my life. And my ability to endure those things and get to this point has now brought me to a point where I have found peace. I have found peace, I have found fulfillment, I have found joy in bringing that to other people. But still, even now, an actor still functions in the real world, and an actor still has to deal with things within their own job. But it's those lessons that I learned that the Marine Corps taught me of enduring, of finding a way, of looking inside myself, and of seeing everyone around me as my team. Those are the things that have pushed me to the point where I can say I make my living as an actor, which is what I've always wanted to do, probably since I was a little child. We can focus a lot as veterans on what we've been through, what the negative aspects of it are. And those truly do exist. Those are truths that are out there. But what's also out there is those wonderful lessons that we learned, that endurance that we learned, that ability to look at a situation that other people are falling apart over and just see it as another obstacle that we need to overcome. I don't understand people that gag when somebody else is throwing up. I don't understand people that faint at the sight of blood. I don't understand people that freak out when something tragic happens. I recognize that those are all difficult situations, but I also recognize that they're part of life. And I think that's also a gift that the Marine Corps gave me. If you get a group of veterans together, we'd rather tell funny stories about what happened. Because we all have some really great funny stories. Because we used humor. Humor and complaining are the 2 things that veterans do very well. Because we use those 2 tools to get through our military career. And although the world, I think, is opening up, and it wants to understand the things that we went through that aren't humorous, they want to understand us as a person, we're still a long way from that. We can talk about it face to face, because if I stand in a room with a Marine, he can tell me what he's been through and I understand it. I can tell him what I've been through and he understands it. If I stand in a room with a very dear friend who has never been in the military, I can't tell them what I've been through because they can't understand it. They can only understand the story. So I hope, as a society, we want to move past the surface of what a veteran is. And we want to move into what is inside that's there. We want to understand it. We want to embrace it. We don't want to give it lip service. I'll tell you something. On Veterans Day, or on Memorial Day, which incidentally most people don't know the difference between the two, but I could get into that. But on those days, if you're a veteran, you walk into Denny's, they'll give you free food. If you walk into an ice cream shop, they may give you some ice cream. You know, there's all these different things that people do for veterans on those days. I personally don't do any of that. I don't do any of it because, for me personally, I didn't spend my 6 years for accolades. And although I think the accolades are nice, and I encourage it, and I know lots of my brothers and sisters go out and eat free all day long on Veterans Day, and I think that's great. For me, that's not what it was about. So I'm very proud to have served in the Marine Corps. I very much believe in the saying, once a Marine, always a Marine. But I'm very proud of the fact that I have been able, after 50 years, to take some of those lessons and see how they made my life better, see how they made me stronger. And in many ways, they taught me the value of love.